Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and as promised I've got another book review for you. So please subscribe to my channel and suggest any other books that you think I should read or review. So comment and let me know. Today's book that we are reviewing is Black Text by it's edited by Nick Mhlongo, and there are different contributors to this book who write essays reflecting on their experiences regarding black text. These contributors include Dudu Basani Dube, Fred Kumalo, Mahalo Mashiko, Tando Kolojiga, Sugul Fenyati, Lucas Lidwabe, Sfisim Zombe, and many others. So if you want to read the stories in depth, grab yourself a copy and do so. I will not necessarily be discussing each and every contributor story because I realized that I will talk forever. I tried. So I'm just going to pick on some themes that popped up for me that I relate to. And it's just a quarter of the amount of things this book talks about. So read it and experience it your way. For me, I learned a great deal from the introduction itself. I mean, it changed my perceptions towards black text because I had a very narrow, if I must say, perspective on what black text is, which was negative, and it only involved money. But as I read throughout the book and the different experiences, you then realize there is more than one black text, and therefore it does not mean there is going to be a blanket definition of black text. So yeah, that was amazing. So I had to shift my way of thinking a little bit. So one of the things that stood out for me is that you can look at black text as something we all experience through the fact that regardless of whether you got a qualification and you've got a professional job, you will still face issues such as debt, and that cycle just continues because you have to put your family through school, you have to build houses, you have to pay off your student loans. So debt forms part of black text because you have to pay this stuff, and necessarily other races may not necessarily have that type of burden. Another definition or lens that black text is looked at is through the lens of ubuntu and the philosophy that I am who I am because of others. Therefore, black text is part of our culture. We have to help one another sort of navigate through life, keep our families together, please our ancestors, and not face this world on your own, or be greedy with your resources. Share it for the greater good of all. Then there's the third sort of perspective towards black text, which opposes the idea that it's part of our culture. They argue that we need to look at it through historical lens, political lens, look at the history of South Africa, how the apartheid system did not allow for our great-grandparents, great-grandparents, our parents, ourselves, even ourselves to build wealth. Therefore, we find ourselves in this situation where we have to pay this black tax in order to help our less fortunate family members or friends who may not be lucky enough to have the resources you may have. I keep looking down because my notes are here. So one of the things the authors agree on is that we all experience black text in some form, and I wouldn't have agreed with this if I hadn't read the book myself, because then I learned that there are different types of ways to experience black text. So for example, through time and space. So you sharing your time, sharing your space, where you have family members who stay over at your home. Your childhood home is no longer yours. It belongs to whoever who may need it for the time while they're going to school, while they're trying to hustle a job, while they're starting to get on their feet. So you have uncles and cousins and immediate and extended family staying over. You sharing your bedroom, you sharing your resources, you sharing your time. Petrol, driving people up and down, driving people at stock fails, bus stops, meetings, funerals, and nobody wonders where this petrol comes from, and nobody contributes to the petrol. deferred dreams where you have to hold off your studies and go get a job, you know, to feed your family, because your parents or your caretakers do not have jobs or the means to take care of you. So you have to give up your hopes and dreams of studying and going to find a job, sometimes dropping out of school early in order to support your family. Another one which I experienced throughout my childhood is the roles that we play. Sometimes the eldest child plays the role of a deputy parent because the parents have to go off to work in order to put you through school and provide you with the necessities. Or sometimes your parents are not educated, and we all know that there's job shortages in South Africa, so they're unemployed, they can't get jobs. Therefore, you as the elder child has to take up the role of the provider. The obvious one that we all know, I know, is financial, having to pay off debts that you may have used to put your family through school, or building a home, or even the debt of school fees for yourself and others. So I suggest that you read this book because it allowed me to reflect on how I view black tax, how I react to it, what treatment I accept, what treatment I don't accept, how to understand other people, those who are receiving black tax and those who are being taxed. So read this book, guys. It will change your life. So I'm going to speak about both the positive and the negative of black tax, and referring to some of the writers. I was unable to talk about everybody. I will talk forever, like I said. So the beginning of the book with Basani Dube, if I'm not mistaken, yes. She introduces the idea that if we look at black tax as a way of breaking a cycle, so she makes the example of how her father at the age of 10 started working and provided money. I think he made 20 cents in order to buy sheep for the family, and they started sort of like a farming sheep, and how her sister put her through school. Her sister was able to go study nursing and had a bursary, and she would send 1,800 every month home, and that money sort of got them through life. And they also opened up their home. So did people like Lucas Ledwabe, who speak about having their homes being used as refuge for those who needed it. And those people were able to then build their own lives now and become more successful than the parents who opened their homes. And it's not necessarily seen as a burden from our parents, because they're looking at it as a way of breaking the cycle. And if her sister, for example, didn't send the money home, she wouldn't be who she is today. So black tax is serving a bigger purpose. Lucas Lidwabe even says that he feels proud that his parents were able to see their obligation to serve humanity. So it is seen as giving back, humanitarian act, and not necessarily a bad thing. You've got a story of Nogulunga, who her brother, with a salary of 2,500 rand, was able to put her through university and able to get a job. And then the another person who stood out for me was Piello Mfukeng. He spoke about how sometimes we may view black tax in a negative way, and it's not actually supposed to be in a negative way, because it forms bonds. You're building bonds with your family. You're building a future together, and possibly creating this generational wealth we sort of lack. So he's helping his father build a home, which he thinks is needed for himself. He might inherit it in the future. His kids might inherit it. It's a home that he will visit. his brother helped him go through school like the other contributors I mentioned, and because of that, he now is able to look after himself, and now they both have families. So his brother's kids are his kids, and his kids are his brother's kids as well. So they're raising the family together. It's a unit. It's a thing of building bonds, building legacy, building wealth, a form of wealth, collecting assets, and most importantly, like I said earlier, breaking the cycle. I'm going to end off the positive side of black text by reading a quote, or reading a line from some few lines from Fred Kumalo's contribution. He says, "I am happy that with each generation, the shackles of black text are gradually falling off our figurative wrists, as they should. Naturally, it will not happen overnight. We are up against a sad but mammoth legacy of colonial domination and apartheid economic exploitation." So they believe that black text is serving for the greater good. And I think it was, let me see who it was. There are a couple of people who actually, before I end off, there are a couple of people who themselves benefited from the black tax. Forgot to mention that. People who benefited from the black tax, such as Fred Kumalo, who his father could not pay his school fees, and he went to the villages, and the villagers were able to give him money to go to school. And there are people who mentioned that doing that, being black taxed, brings them some sort of joy and gratification. It's not necessarily a burden. Yes, that is me ending off with the sort of positive side of black tax. Then you come to the negative side of black tax. So I mentioned earlier before that those who take care of their family may feel like a sense of pride, a sense of like we are breaking the cycle, but it's not always that way. For example, some of the things that are touched on by some of the contributors is that it may affect your marriage. For example, if you're trying to get married, it's not easy for you to build your own home. If you are busy building a home for your family, you come in with debt that now your spouse either has to inherit or help you pay off in order for you guys to build your life together. It's a source of conflict in the home, so the person who makes the more money is sort of put against those who don't make money, and you get this power dynamic in the household that isn't necessary. Also, that the pressures that come with being the person who's the provider. You find ourselves staying in jobs where we are experiencing racism, we are being bullied by bosses or mistreated, or we're facing sexual harassments, but because you are burdened with looking after everybody, you have to stay in this job to feed your family. Sometimes the people who help have expectations of their own. For example, one of the Fred Kumalo and Tando Xolo mentioned how, one of them mentions how because he was educated and the villagers paid for his education, what they were expecting in return is that he does that for somebody else. So he couldn't further his studies. He had to put that on hold, go get a job so he can make sure he pays off this debt. And Tando Xolo speaks about how she went to school and not knowing that her mom was asking for favors from people in the neighborhood. When she graduated, she found out about this help that she received from people, and therefore meant she had to send money. So her mom would send her reminders that please send money, probably if there's an issue, somebody doesn't have electricity, or they're struggling with putting someone else's child through school. Because they helped you, you have to help them. So her salary now goes to sort of paying off this debt. As well as the negative side about this black tax is that you can't necessarily help everybody, and those you help sometimes may abuse you. and take advantage of you. And sometimes the sacrifices that are made are too great. For example, a marriage, building your own home. Although you're paying off your sister's school fees, these are money that could have been used to build you a home, to buy you a car, to sort of get you going, as well as supporting family members who don't necessarily stop. It doesn't stop. You constantly having to give. At some point, it no longer becomes breaking the cycle. It's just dependency till the end, and you are unable to sort of build your own thing, or helping people who aren't planning to help themselves or help you in return. So you'll have that drunk uncle who loses jobs, can't keep a job, having kids everywhere, and now it's a cycle that just will never end, and you have to pay for it forever. Paying for a student who fails and doesn't pass. One of the questions Clinton poses is that why can't we not pay black tax and also thrive while we thrive in our personal endeavors? And he says it's because of the high education fees, how the education is structured in itself. It doesn't teach us to be empowered, to depend on ourselves. We have to go work, and when you get to work, you find that there's salary gaps between races. Thirdly, he speaks about church obligations that some people find themselves in, where you may pledge money you may not necessarily have. The money you do have, you could be using it to do constructive things, yet you're falling prey to pastors who tell you that your way to redemption is through money, and you end up paying all this money towards church, and in actual fact it does not help you at the end. Another thing Sfiso touches on is that growing up, we sort of learn about black tax and we internalize it, and subconsciously it affects the way that we think. So and then black tax starts eating you up through the choices that we make, and those choices sort of trap you in a stagnant place when you could have actually done other things and grown as a person, even though you may not have been rich, but you would have grown. For example, these choices we make is the subjects we take at school. So you might be forced to take science because your family believes the science is a subject where you can bring money home. People rewriting matric a couple of times because the marks aren't great enough to get them into the field they want. People aren't willing to study other jobs outside of the prescribed high-paying jobs or high-status jobs that our parents expect us to do. So those are some of the challenges that come with black tax. And also, one of the authors mentions that they feel like they're seen as a walking ATM in the family, and because of the guilt that they carry. Guilt is another thing that comes up a lot in the book. Because of the guilt, you find yourself not being able to say no. You find yourself helping and nobody being able to help you. So if you look at black tax, there are both sides to it. So for me, after reading the book, I understand its role, but I also understand that there needs to be limits. I'm going to end off the negative sort of view by reading Piello's writing, a piece of his writing. Sadly, some of us have allowed our families to abuse our status and professional standing. Siblings refuse to work, demand luxury items we can barely afford,